Okay, so I've got 2 o'clock, so I think we should just get started here. And just for everyone joining, I'm Amy Cherry, the Assistant News Director and a journalist with 1017 FM WDEL. And hopefully you've been to our website, WDEL.com. Most of you probably know me as the person who's been telling Delaware stories for the last 10 years or so. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today from the comfort of your living rooms or your offices or wherever you are for this year's virtual MILLSUMMIT, because I want to share a story with you about how one community is truly working to overcome veteran homelessness. It's something that many communities, including here in Delaware, have tried to do, and some even claim to have done it successfully. But Bryan Meyer, founder of the Veterans Community Project in Kansas City, Missouri, who's here with us today, has actually done it. And with all great things, Bryan, I would say it kind of started with recognizing a problem and then you having the creativity and the fortitude to come up with a viable solution. So, I mean, as a veteran yourself, I want to start at the beginning of your story and what really inspired you to go down this road.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize ahead of time for anybody who's listening. I had a few technical difficulties, so I'm actually doing this from my truck at a gas station. So there's a car next to me. Their engine's making a lot of noise. So hopefully you can hear me all right. But yeah, so my kind of background and my story, and it kind of leads into the organization story, is I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school in 2001. Deployed to Iraq a couple times and came home back to Kansas City. And I like to tell people that I had pretty much an ideal support system in place. I had plenty of friends and family, lots of people that really attended to me, but I still had my own struggles. And that kind of culminated in one day. The story is that I'm standing in front of a judge after getting in some trouble, and he's given me two options: that I can either do a little time in jail or I can enroll in community college. So I was pretty fortunate in that respect. I enrolled in community college. Fast forward a little while, I have my master's degree. I'm getting ready to graduate law school. And I had this overwhelming sensation of, not everybody was as lucky as me. And in that moment, in front of that judge, a step left, a step right, I'm a very different person. So by that time in my life, I had met some other veterans that kind of felt the same. And we started looking out there and saying to ourselves, if we could do anything to really impact the veteran population, and specifically the homeless veteran population, what would that look like? And let's draw it up like the rules don't apply to us. Let's just assume if we can do what we feel is the best thing to move somebody from street homeless into long-term permanent housing stability, what does it look like? And we landed on two things. And I think everybody kind of, if you know of us, you know us as the people who build tiny homes as transitional housing for the homeless veteran population, as well as offer kind of wraparound case management services. But the other part of it, what we do, which is just as significant, is we operate outreach centers for any veteran to walk in and receive any number of services from us. So these walk-in clinics are basically, we take the approach: if you're a vet, you walk in the door, you have an issue, we have a resource to fix that. So that was about 2016. Me and the other co-founders left our jobs. I left my law firm, and we decided to take a shot at starting up this nonprofit.
And so this nonprofit, really what it's comprised of is sort of a two-part system. It's a tiny home village, and then also this clinic that provides the wraparound services that so many people experiencing homelessness need. They need so much more than just a roof over their head. So take us to that village. Tell us what it looks like.
Yeah, so the village itself in Kansas City, Missouri, there are 49 homes, and there's a 5,000 square foot community center. Now, that community center is really what I call like the meat and potatoes of what we do, because you don't just move somebody. Giving a homeless person a house doesn't solve the homelessness issue. You have to provide, wraparound services, case management, get to the underlying issues of homelessness in order to get them back on their feet and in a more long-term successful position. So that 5,000 square foot community center has the case management offices, medical clinic, dental clinic, learning lab, veterinary clinic, large multi-purpose room, training kitchen, commercial kitchen. It's really kind of the idea of bringing all the services needed to the population right there in the village. But again, The village is 49 homes. 5 of those homes are what we call family units because we do deal with that in some aspect. And then very nearby, we have our outreach center, which is the walk-in clinic I mentioned earlier.
And that walk-in clinic sort of operates in a way that's more simplistic than if you were to just go to the VA, right?
That's correct. There's this kind of misconception out there that if you're a veteran, that you can just kind of go down to the VA and say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm having issues. I'd like to get some help." Unfortunately, that's not how the VA works. It can be tedious and it can be difficult to actually get yourself enrolled in the VA. In addition, the services they offer are really dependent on a lot of factors indicative to an individual service. So the time they served, active versus reserve, period of service, what your discharge status was. There are a lot of different determinants when it comes to qualifying for the programs they offer. Our outreach center operates like we think most people assume the VA does, which is if you walk in and you say you're a veteran and you have an issue, we say, okay, we can help you. The only qualifier is that you took your hand, raised it, and made an oath to serve our country. You could have been in the military for 1 day or 100 years, and you qualify for all of our programs and services.
Now, what is the average length of stay for a veteran who comes to you and says, "I need help"?
Yeah, so in our housing program, and what we did, I want to just kind of loop back a little bit to get to this. When we decided that we were going to address the homelessness issue, one of the first things we did was go out and speak with homeless veterans and ask them, why are you out here on the street as opposed to existing shelters, transitional living facilities? And we gathered all that information and kind of created our model. And one of the things that people spoke about was, well, you have 6-month, 9-month, 12-month programs, but I, as a homeless individual, understand I need more assistance than that. So that program's not going to be long enough. Or if I go to it, I'm going to quit before I start, just kind of wait my time out. So we decided that our program was going to have no cap on it, meaning so long as you are working your case management program, you are, making progressive steps forward, we're not going to put a limitation to how long you can be there. We'd rather invest the extra few months to see you more successful for additional years. Answering your question directly, right about now, our average stay is around the 290-day mark.
Okay, so in those 290 days, I mean, the better part of a year, talk to us about what veterans and their families are learning along this journey so that they can move on from here and be, whether it's a homeowner or into an apartment or finding that perfect transition.
So we like to tailor everybody's program to their individual needs, meaning that homelessness is complicated, and not everybody is homeless because of an addiction or mental health issue, or some of the big things you may think, right? A lot of times, not a lot of times, but you find it's just poor financial management. They have income, they're not managing it well, or there's something else going on. So we take a very wraparound approach to it, right? So we focus on health and wellness, fiscal understanding, income stability, your social network. All these things kind of encompass the program as a whole. So we keep a very low case manager to resident ratio. We try to keep it as close to 8 to 1 as possible. Fluctuates a little bit due to people transitioning in and out. And we sit down, our case managers sit down, and they tailor the program to the individual's needs. Because there are people that are in a position to go into, as you mentioned, home ownership. Some people, the goal is just to have an apartment to rent. Some people have to come to understanding they're always going to need supportive services, so we have to find them permanent supportive housing. We've had people transition out into Habitat for Humanity, college dorms, people enrolling into college and taking that path. So we really try to keep it individualized to what got the person there and what their long-term goals are.
And I think that really speaks to sort of the overarching theme here that those experiencing homelessness need so much more than just a roof over their head. And I sort of alluded to this, I would say, in my intro here, that several years ago, many of you joining this may remember, there was a really big push, specifically here in Delaware, but I believe it was also kind of a nationwide thing, to end veteran homelessness. And there was this sort of point in time count, and there were veterans that were identified that they said, you're homeless. And by the end of this 1 year period, they patted themselves on the back and said, yay, we don't have any more veteran homelessness. When really, I think there's probably a new veteran who becomes homeless every single day. And, you know, just because you're staying at your aunt's house for a few weeks and you have a roof over your head doesn't mean you're in fact able to stay there forever and therefore not homeless. How do you really go and address that root cause and change sort of that way of thinking?
Yeah, so I don't want to take I don't want to take anything away from the initiative to end veteran homelessness, because I think it was a great initiative and a great ideal and goal. But what you can find happening in those situations is patchworking, like you said, where you say, okay, I've given somebody a roof, they're not on the street, therefore they're not homeless, or they're couch surfing or slumlord situation. We consider all those things to be homeless. If you are not able to maintain yourself in a stable surrounding, then maybe you're not technically homeless, but you're on the verge of it. So what we do is we want to get people to that point that we feel confident they have all the things in place that they will be able to, operate productively in the environment around them, and that they really are on stable footing. As you mentioned, you can say you've ended veteran homelessness. Hell, I've said, yeah, we're ending veteran homelessness, but you'll never end veteran homelessness. So long as there are veterans, there are going to be homeless veterans. And I do take issue with kind of that rhetoric of, yay, we ended veteran homelessness, because to me, that can get us to a point that we're taking our eye off the ball, meaning that if you say you've done it, that you've really done it, then what's the need to keep focusing on it, right? Then it's moving on to the next thing. So I'd rather more recognize that we can cure it for points in time. We can reduce it significantly, but if we don't keep a focus on it, the problem can get back out of control very quickly.
Absolutely. And before we keep going here, I just want to remind everyone to please use that chat function that you have within the Zoom webinar. If you've got questions, we want this to be an interactive discussion. So while I'm happy to talk to Bryan the whole time too, we want to hear from you guys. So please feel free to write those questions. And Bryan, I want to backtrack a little bit to how you got to where you are and talk about the actual construction of the tiny home village. And you said that if you could create something that could, without any rules, what would it look like? And I'm sure you had some rules you had to follow along the way. So let's talk about some of maybe the logistical or financial barriers that stood in your way that you were able to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, we had to follow some rules, but we broke a whole heck of a lot too, and I'm pretty proud of it. Um, so when we came up with this idea, the first thing we did is we went to the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and we said, look, we want to build a village of tiny homes, but the coding and zoning on the books, they don't allow for it. But we feel this model can really make an impact, if not end street homeless. Take all street homeless veterans off the street here. Would you get behind us? And that's really the key thing starting off that happened, was getting the support of the mayor and the city council in Kansas City, Missouri. And then we started looking at what we can do to get exemptions to certain codes or zoning issues. Now, one thing I do want to say is one thing that makes us very different is when you hear tiny home or you think about that, a lot of times people think about these trailer homes, a wooden house on a trailer, or what I call sheds with beds sometimes. Our houses are built to 2018 building code. They're on concrete slabs connected to city utilities. They're stick built. So they're really true homes, just of a smaller scale. So after we got the city on board, yeah, then the big question is, how do we actually pull this off? So we went around and just started soliciting as many construction companies as we could, engineering firms, corporations, individuals, letting them know our plan and putting it out there and seeing what type of response we could get. And I think one thing that we've really learned is that so many people out there want to do something for veterans, but the most they're ever asked to is stand up and clap at a ball game or buy them a beer in the airport, which is great. Don't stop doing it. I've got plenty of free beer at airports. I love it. But they want to do more, and there aren't a lot of avenues. And I think that we're really a conduit for the community at large to give directly back to veterans, to actually use their hands and help do something tangible for the issue. So as much as we are built to code and get professional help and labor, it's also really the community in Veterans Community Project is there for a reason. And it's because the community came together and got their hands dirty and helped us build this thing.
And actually, we got our first question here. It's from Bryan Dugas. And Bryan, he wants to know if there was a huge veteran homelessness problem in Kansas City before your project sort of came to be, and whether you're accepting veterans from around the country who can come live there.
Yeah, so Kansas City had made a lot of strides in veteran homelessness before we started. I think, uh, if I remember correctly, we were somewhere in the 135 to 140 street homeless veteran range when we kind of kicked off. But not to go on a tangent here, but uh, those numbers are collected in a very specific way. Earlier, I was talking about how the VA kind of defines veteran in certain ways, time and service, all that. In addition, the way that they define homelessness. So, oftentimes if you're sleeping on your aunt's couch or in a car or a short-term, slumlord situation, you're not counted as homeless. So every published number, I tell people, look at the published number from point in time counts and add 30 to 40% to that. And that's our definition of homelessness. And that's how many homeless vets we anticipate to be out there. So anyway, that's speaking to the Kansas City part of the question. The second part is, no, we feel that it's important right now to only address the homelessness issue with inside Kansas City. So we still do outreach. We still have people that go to the camps, build relationships with people in the shelters. We want to verify that they are, homeless in the community before we move them in. That's due to our model, I think, appealing to the population a little bit more. And we often get requests from people who are homeless in other areas willing to travel to us and enter our program. Instead, we try to hook them up with local organizations, in whatever place or city they're at.
Okay, so the goal wouldn't be to sort of bring them to Kansas City. It would be to keep them where they are and find them the support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And so in my years covering those experiencing homelessness, I've learned that there isn't a lot of support for families as a home, or, to keep them as a family unit, if you will. Like there's a mom and there's kids over here, and then there's dads who are forced to go over here, and not a whole lot of things or places that try to keep them together, which is sort of its own challenge. I'm wondering how the Veterans Community Project aims to sort of address that.
Yeah, so I openly tell people all the time that the project we did in Kansas City will be the project that took us the longest and was the most expensive. We paid some stupid taxes along the way. There wasn't a great playbook to go off of. Nobody was doing this, so we could only steal as many best practices from other places as were applicable. And one of the things we underestimated was the family aspect of it. How many street family homeless were out there. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 49 homes. 4 of those units are designated as family units. So we do allow for a homeless family to stay in one place because, as you did mention earlier, most group living situation shelters don't allow for that. That's a lot for safety, security. Unfortunately, in group living and shelter situations, domestic violence increases, physical violence, assault, physical, sexual, all go up. We have this model with these individualized homes, front doors that lock, private bathrooms, so we're much more accommodating for that. And that kind of leads into the thing that we really didn't prepare ourselves for, and we're kind of we're adapting as we move forward, which is if you are homeless and say maybe you're not married, but you have kids, well, you're never going to get visitation and custody at a lot of these other places. What we found is we have residents that have been with us for a while. All of a sudden, they're getting visitation rights back. So they have a couple kids that are coming over for a weekend or a week, or they have grandchildren that they start to take care of while they're living there. So we're going to proportion out and build a few more family units in all the new developments kind of moving forward.
You mentioned that that sort of came as a surprise to you. I'm wondering what other surprises you encountered along the way.
Yeah, I think that we had this idea conceptually that if you took a segment of of the homeless population, the veteran homeless population, just from our experiences in the military, that we thought, hey, there should be this bond between these individuals because they all share a military service. What surprised me is how deep that bond is, how quickly and closely some relationships develop in this village, how quickly, you have somebody who's been very isolated from, just other people in general, how much they come out of their shell, how much they start to develop real friendships with their neighbors and support each other throughout. I think that's what we hoped for, but we didn't really we couldn't really know for sure until we tried it, and it's been a really pleasant surprise.
You talked about when you first got started in Kansas City and you had those discussions with politicians and the people that you needed to get in touch with to sort of make this happen. And I'm wondering if there were bumps in that road, if it was just a smooth process in terms of they said, yes, we have a problem, sounds like you've got a good answer, or if it was sort of more curvy.
So not from politicians, right? Like, I don't think there's a politician out there that doesn't want to stick a feather in their cap and say that I did something great for veterans. That's a pretty unifying issue. But understandably, there was some nimbyism out there. Some people saying, I don't know how comfortable I feel with homeless people living in my backyard, or what's this going to do to my property value or anything like that. So, especially with what we did in Kansas City, it took a lot of community engagement, meaning the first year or two, if somebody would let me into their meeting, their, spaghetti dinner, whatever it was, we were showing up and talking them through the program and trying to help them understand what we were doing. Hell, we even went door to door in the neighborhood around where our development was going to be and explain, hey, look, this isn't a trailer park we're building. There's going to be case management on site. It's transitional, so it's not permanent. And, it's for the veteran population. Again, we keyed on that, and most people want to do something support, so we're able to work through it. And I like to tell people, one of the things I'm most proud of is we bought this piece of property. It was kind of a piece of property nobody wanted in the city. We bought it for $500, and we've had it reappraised for, I think we're getting close to pushing about 2 million now. And I really like to brag that we were able to move homeless people into a community and raise the property value of not only that property but the surrounding ones.
Do you think the veterans aspect of this helps with that whole NIMBYism thing that I think people tend to feel when they see a homeless shelter move into their neighborhood, or we've seen it here in Delaware, some outrage over substance abuse and recovery programs in their neighborhood?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. When it comes to substance abuse and mental health, things like that, one of the things that I'll tell people is we do a lot of that screening ahead of time. And if somebody has a substance abuse issue that is beyond what we feel is appropriate to treat there, we'll find them the appropriate facility or appropriate mental health facility. And then when they're ready, they can kind of come back to us, and we'll have a place waiting for them. But yeah, of course, I'd be blind if I didn't say that the veteran aspect of it uh, definitely assist in getting over that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons we're here is to talk about whether this project could be replicated elsewhere. And we've got a question here from Ryan Kennedy, who says he's a former military brat too, wants to know if, and thanks you for your service, Brian, and wants to know
Back at you.
if you've ever considered expanding your concept to other states, and or whether you've been approached directly by other states who want you to come there.
Yeah, so I openly, when me and the other guys kind of started this thing, we were all from Kansas City, all vets, wanted to do something for Kansas City. I fully anticipated that I would help get this off the ground, 2 to 3 years, turn it over to some other people. I'd go back to practicing law or whatever else. What we didn't anticipate was when we started having successes the way we were, and at a much higher rate, the flood of requests we would start getting from not only other municipalities, but states, counties, just individuals wanting to do good all over the United States, asking us to expand our programs and services. So we, about 1 year ago, kind of launched our national expansion program. That's being led up by for anybody that's familiar with politics, his name's Jason Kander. He was Missouri Secretary of State. Uh, got some headlines not too long ago because he dropped out of politics to deal with his own PTSD. Jason's a friend to Kansas City, and together he and I are kind of running the national expansion program. He's really taken the lead, and our goal is 8 more cities by 2022. And I can confidently say we'll make that happen at this point. So we're getting ready to break ground outside of Denver soon. We're getting ready to make an official, even though the cat's out of the bag, we haven't officially announced it, but official announcement on St. Louis soon. And then we've had serious talks with city halls and dozens of other places. Right now, our expansion is only limited by our own capacity, and the idea of we want to grow this at an appropriate pace in order to provide the services in the manner that we feel they should be provided. Meaning, we don't want to. The most important thing we do is serve vets, and we don't want to dilute that product by just building a bunch of homes all over the place.
And I think it's important to point out too that in our past discussion, you told me that you're 100% donation based. So I'm wondering if the ability to raise that money impacts where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing that up. And I know all the people back at my office that work so hard to find those dollars for us to do what we do are really going to appreciate you teeing this one up for me. But yeah, as of right now, we are 100% donation-based organization, meaning individuals, corporations, foundations. There's no big government grant behind us or anything like that. And the underlying cause of that is because we feel very strongly that we've created a great, sensible model in order to address this issue. And unfortunately, the way funding streams are structured right now, uh, if we accepted those dollars, trust me, I want $100 million check to do this. I want to be able to focus more on the services delivery. But if I took that check, it would limit things that we're able to do. For instance, what we mentioned earlier, taking the cap off how long people can be there. Those are things that are put in place. Those are some of those strings attached. So we're actively working to change the strings that come with those dollars as well. But right now, yeah, it is a limitation. I'm not afraid to tell people this is expensive, but I think it's worth the investment. And I think what the outputs are worth the investment. So when we look at expansion, one of the things we have to evaluate is the community's ability to financially sustain this right now, because we're not at a point that there's some supplemental funding stream.
Give folks an idea of how much an investment like this costs. How much did it cost to build the tiny village in Kansas City?
Yeah, Kansas City's tough. I'll say that because, again, the most expensive one, and it kind of took us the longest. But what I'll put it like is this. I know that for a 50-house village with 50 homes and a 5,000 square foot community center, depending on the market, you're looking at about $3.5 million if you were just to write somebody a check to build it for you, right? Like pay market rate for the actual construction of it. That's not figuring in land acquisition. But Fortunately for us, we do get a lot of in-kind donations. The construction industry, general labor, they all kind of want to give back, give that discount. If I can make it, a great example is the homes in our village. There's about $45,000 worth of hard materials in each home. Uh, we built our last round for about $17,000 a piece. And I think as we grow, we'll get that number down even further. So that's, the building of the village. We're building a subdivision. It can get expensive. The year over year costs are pretty reasonable.
Now, how many people are employed at the village in terms of counselors and those wraparound services that you provide?
Yeah, so we have right now we basically have what I'll call about 10 people who do nothing but veteran services, right? So that goes from not only the case managers who are working with the residents, but the people who are working with the walk-in clientele. Um, there's some administrative stuff in there, but just like any other nonprofit organization, we also have executive staff. I have an executive director in Kansas City. I have people whose jobs it is to go out there and search for grants and help us raise dollars. That way our case managers aren't trying to split time between being fundraisers and case managers, that they can do what they need to do and have the resources to do it without worrying.
And I imagine too, the costs that you speak of that you experienced in Kansas City, in terms of the land acquisition and whatnot, were you to come to the East Coast, you're probably going to be facing some higher costs in terms of building and whatnot.
Absolutely. We're going to look at increased building costs, increased costs for land acquisition, but fortunately, I'm confident we can do it. And there are some cities on the East Coast that we're currently working with, and I know that we'll be able to make it happen out there. It's when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the millions of dollars in investment now and the long-term payoff, it's just pretty simple, because we're talking about, yeah, you talk about $3.5 million to build a village. Well, over the course of 15 years, you're looking at thousands of individuals transitioned off the street, into some sort of permanent housing solution.
Now, tell us about, we've got a question here from Bryan Dugas. He wants to know about the infrastructure and the water, sewer, electricity, how that all works with the village.
Yeah, so we have to run it just like you would any subdivision. I mean, we ran it and connected it in with city utilities. We only run electric and water and sewer. Gas isn't something we really need. So we kind of cut that component out, but it's just like any other subdivision, just smaller.
And to be clear, anyone who lives there doesn't pay for anything.
No, that's another tenet of our program, and something that a lot of the uh, large dollar grants that I spoke about earlier would disqualify us from doing. So when a resident lives in our village, they don't pay rent, they don't pay for utilities, they don't pay for any programs and services. That's not to say that they aren't on a financial plan. But for us, it's common sense that if somebody is experiencing homelessness, they likely don't have savings. They probably have debts that need to be paid down. So rather than us say, okay, you're making income now, give us 40% of your income, what we do is we say, you're making income now, we're going to get you on a savings plan and a debt pay down plan, so you get used to a large percentage of your paycheck not being available to you when you get it moving out. And then there's generally a nest egg of savings, so they can pay first last month's rent, purchase a vehicle, whatever that looks like.
Now, I want to talk about something that I think has sort of impacted literally everyone's way of life across the entire globe, and it's the coronavirus pandemic. And I want to know how it's impacted the village or how it's impacted your operations.
Yeah. So when we were kind of planning out this concept, this idea of a bunch of individualized homes and the tiny house community, never at one point did myself or any of the other co-founders say, oh, and this model is better because if there's a global pandemic, our residents will be more safe than those in a shelter. But as it turns out, in a global pandemic, we have an advantage that a lot of group living situations don't have, uh, other just general homeless shelters. So a lot of that population was affected in a completely different way than ours, right? Because in those situations, you get somebody, showing symptoms or anything like that, all of a sudden they're having to leave the shelter. Homeless individuals can't self-isolate. There are plenty of just kind of self-evident issues there. From the village standpoint, our residents we were fine. We just kind of, cut down on people who were going to come in and out. We didn't have any cases in the village. The real impact was felt around prior to the pandemic. About 90% of the population in our village were employed. About half those people lost their jobs. So that, we had to make some adjustments there. We made a few other small programmatic adjustments in terms of, you know, uh, bringing more resources to them and not allowing them to go out and get them. In addition, we kind of stopped moving people and in some instances really stopped transitioning people out. We've opened that all back up now. We just do 14-day quarantines or get a negative test before you move in. So we've adapted in that way. Now, from the general homeless population, we made the decision that the only way to serve homeless veterans during coronavirus was to serve the homeless population at large. So we kind of formed a little bit of a coalition with other service providers in Kansas City, came up with a plan to consolidate resources to one centralized location so we could stop individuals seeking services from going all over the place, potentially spreading. And we opened ourselves up to serving more than just the veteran population for quite a while until we understood really the depths of the pandemic and how it was going to affect everything.
Would you say that right now there's a larger focus on job placement in terms of, since you've experienced so many people who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic? And if so, do you anticipate potentially longer than usual stays? You said right now you've got that 290-day average stay. Do you think it'll be probably lengthened due to the effects ongoing?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see our numbers kind of in terms of day stay go up a little bit, just for the reasons that you stated. But I think the really kind of interesting impact is going to be there are a lot of people who are, veterans that are working poor. And right now there's a lot of safety net precautions in place in terms of unemployment assistance and all these other things out there. And, stays on rent and utilities not being shut off. And when all that starts to end, I think that, 3, 6 months down the line, you're going to see quite a quite a peak in individuals who are trying to access places like our walk-in centers for the first time. And where do they go? They don't even know how to start in that system. So they're looking for emergency financial assistance, which we've already seen an increase in, or navigating, you know, all these different service providers that are out there. If you've always been fine, and then in a very quick 3 to 6 month window, and it's not gradual, you don't even know where to start looking for help. So we've really tried to be active about reaching out to people in terms of getting a hold of us before you're at that point. Let's do prevention work, because we know prevention is so much more cost effective than it is to fixing homelessness.
Has the pandemic affected donations in any way?
Yeah, it has affected donations. I mean, we're doing all right. A lot of great people stepped up and recognized that donations were going to be affected, so they gave out more. But you know, I say all right, but the truth of the matter is, uh, while donations may not be suffering as much, we have such an increased demand for our services that it's requiring more and more funding to be able to meet the needs. So while baseline donations have been okay, uh, keeping up with the need, that's been extremely difficult. So In short, donations are always needed.
Tell us, no, I actually tell us how people can donate. I think that's important.
Yeah, thank you. So veteranscommunityproject.org is our website, and I always direct people there because it is kind of the hub for everything we're doing, from national expansion to getting involved to all the different ways to donate. And we have it set up. If anybody's interested in just donating to our COVID impact funding, or the village in particular, or whatever appeals to them, if you go to veteranscommunityproject.org, there's going to be different avenues for it.
Share with us one of your favorite success stories. I'm sure you have so many, but
One of my favorite success stories, that's difficult. um I mean, there's one individual who really stands out for me with me, because we had when we built our initial village, we built it in phases because we had to build capacity. Again, it required money. So we built 13 homes, and then 13 homes, and then 23 more after that, plus the 5,000 square foot community center. And this individual, she's one of our what we call original 13. So one of the first 13 people we moved into these houses, and they all got a little bit, it's a big deal for us, when like from sitting around a bar talking about this stuff to actually having homes built. That was really impactful for myself and the other co-founders. So this person's one of our original 13, and she just became her she became the primary caretaker for her granddaughter. She really became the village leader in a way, meaning that as she progressed through the program, people saw that and they wanted to catch up to her. And she just really did some incredible things. And not only that, it all culminates in her moving out into a Habitat for Humanity house. And it's just, it's the type of situation that I wish everybody would go through. And then, of course, her being original 13, I have a personal connection to her, and she's just a great beaming person. So she's one of my favorites.
have you ever had someone who moved in, spent some time, thought they were ready to set out on their own, did, but then needed to come back? And how do you handle that situation, if so?
Yeah. mm, let's be real. They're not all success stories. You know, we have people that we've had to ask to leave. We've had people that, uh, you know, have chosen to leave because of what you just said. They weren't ready. I mean, a very, very real example is we had an individual who one of our case managers basically said, look, like, you have to stop doing drugs, right? Like, I want you to tell me that, and we made him say this out loud, you are choosing drugs over being in this village and all these amenities. And he said, yes, I choose drugs over that. And so we moved him out, you know. Yeah, a couple months later he came back to us and wanted to try at it again, and we welcomed him back with open arms. That is another tenet of our program that's different than a lot of others, is we can keep working with people. We're really not trying to give up, and we're sure as heck not trying to create homelessness by ejecting someone.
Mhm. And to be clear, the person in this instance who initially chose drugs, he or she had supports in place from your program, could have tried to help curb the addiction.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, we have so many supports in place for addiction programming and everything like that. One thing that I really like to get out there is all the services that we offer are really in partnership with existing organizations. So the case managers all work for Veterans Community Project, but we lean on and partner with all the existing agencies. We're not trying to recreate the wheel here, right? We're just trying to integrate with that. So addiction counseling, mental health, all that stuff. We have incredible partners who step in and want to do all that with us.
And so these are existing community partners, who nonprofits, whatnot, who you've all connected with, and you sort of send them there or they come to you?
Absolutely. We seek them out. Just when I talked about having a medical clinic, a dental clinic, all those things on site, I mean, we don't employ dentists and doctors. What we do is we partner with, hospitals, private practitioners, and they come in and donate time and donate a lot of that to us to serve our population.
We talked about you expanding to other cities, but I want to know from your perspective, could this literally be replicated anywhere in the world?
Yeah, I really think it could be replicated anywhere, and I think that it's needed everywhere. That's, one of the things that when we started with this idea when we were looking at national expansion of, okay, where's the greatest need? Well, we quickly realized the need is everywhere. So let's look at places that we can deploy the fastest, because the more cities we show that they can do this, or the more times we show that we can do this, the more cities will get on board with it. I don't see that there's anything prohibiting every city, big or small, from having this type of program in place. Not everywhere needs a 50 house village. Sometimes it can be 25 houses, but some places need more. They may need a couple 50 house villages to make an impact. And when we're talking about anywhere between 3 and 3.5 acres to pull off a 50 house village, I mean, you see that around a lot more than you think. So it's just about having the commitment and will to put it in place.
Now, for Denver and St. Louis, where you're planning to go, can you say that these are places where you identified the need, or places where the cities identified the need and came to you?
It's always a combination, right? So we kind of put it out there to a lot of different people. Hey, we're interested in 8 locations, and what would you have? Outside of Denver is a really interesting story, because it was actually a developer that approached us and said, I'm doing this great development and I want to bring you in with me, and I want to portion off part of my land for you guys to build your village on it, right? One, he was good-hearted, but the other part is they have affordable housing quotas. So we were able to go to the city and say, hey, will our program count as their affordable housing quota, the developer's affordable housing quota? Uh, will this work? And the city gave us that variance. So that's a unique way around it there, and that's how we got a private ultimately build infrastructure and donate the land. The municipalities have been very, very active in trying to kind of recruit us to them.
Hmm. Now, with Denver and with St. Louis, are we looking at 50 or so tiny home villages, or that several village model that you spoke of? Sort of, what do they look like?
Yeah, so actually outside of Denver, and it's kind of an affluent suburb out there, we're going to start with 25 and a community center. St. Louis, we're starting with 50, but if St. Louis could be one of those places that we look at, is their demand being so great, and there being enough property available, that we may look at long term some sort of model where we have 2 villages located in different areas.
Now, you haven't mentioned it, but I got to ask, any plans to be here in Delaware?
So the closest we've gotten out there so far is we have had active talks with Jersey City, and kind of looked at some things there, but nowhere is off the table whatsoever. I can't speak to any specific talks we've had about Delaware, right there. I'm confident that we've been reached out to, because we've had requests from all the states at this point. But the plans to get everywhere eventually, as quickly as possible. So what I would always say is, if there's anybody that's really passionate about bringing our project to somewhere close to them, please reach out to us, and we can talk through, what we're looking for right now and what we're trying to do. Because even though we're only doing 8 by 2022, the next round after that, we're probably going to be looking at double, tripling that. So.
Do you know the need in Jersey City right now in terms of veteran homelessness?
Well, and that kind of gets into if you were to look at what we talked about earlier, right? So what is the demographic area that you allow people to come in, right? Now, it's weird to say that, we don't allow people from other cities to come to the Kansas City project when obviously homelessness doesn't have borders, right? So we take from the greater Kansas City area. We just draw a circle around it. So that's really what we'd be looking like in the Jersey City area too. To what extent, we're not sure, but obviously you have New York with such a high population, other surrounding communities. So the demand there, exact numbers, I couldn't tell you, but it's big, uh, lots.
Yeah, the proximity to New York City and then also Newark, New Jersey, too. I would think
Yeah.
it's pretty strong. And I'm sure costs there are quite high.
They are. Costs there are quite high, but you also, the benefit of that is costs there are high, but they're also very philanthropic, wealthy people out there as well, who those numbers don't seem as big, you know?
Let me ask you this. Can you imagine ever going back to being a lawyer?
Yeah, no, I think that's done for me, but that's okay. I was probably never cut out to really be a lawyer anyway. So I don't know. Yeah, that one's probably off the table.
I mean, good. I can't even imagine in just having our discussion here. It's hard to see going from being a lawyer to where you are now, and you must
Yeah.
be really proud of the journey that you've gone on yourself.
Yeah, it was a gamble, but I mean, the worst thing that happened was I set out to try to do something really good and it didn't work out. And the only thing I had to do was remind myself that if it didn't work out, it was only gonna not work out because of external factors, that I was gonna try hard. So I was never gonna regret that. But I promise you, there are more people who would have thought it was crazy that knew me before I became a lawyer, that I ended up being a lawyer in the first place, because that would have been the longest shot ever. I think it probably would have been more in line with who I am as a person, that I would quit being a lawyer to start a nonprofit or some crazy thing like that. So,
What piece of advice do you have for somebody who wants to start something like you've done? And maybe it's not necessarily for veterans, but they want to take an idea, they want to see it to fruition, and they want to make a change.
the first thing is, and I will tell you that we did a lot of this when we kind of came up with the idea. We spent a lot of time investigating to see if there was anybody doing anything remotely similar, right? And the closest we could come up with would be like Habitat for Humanity, right? And the initial intent was maybe to convince somebody offering programming to expand into these new things, right? Because there's a better chance of success there than trying to start something from nothing, right? When we didn't and we realized that we were so far outside the spectrum what anybody was doing, that's when we're like, okay, we're going to do this ourselves. The I don't know if it's really advice, but every problem's got a solution, and every brick wall you run into, there's always going to be a workaround. Sometimes you got to get creative, and sometimes you got to really um, dig to the root cause of it, right? So if something is blocking you, ask why that thing exists in the first place, right? And doesn't need to be there, such as a zoning ordinance or anything like that. Like, feel free to question the root of it, and don't just say, well, we can't do that because nobody else has. Like, that inhibits bigger ideas. You got to be able to say, well, why hasn't anybody done this? Or, what can I do to accomplish this?
Is there a roadblock that you hit along the way that I don't want to say that you weren't able to overcome, but that you were like, damn, I really, really wish that we could have been able to do X, and something stood in the way?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that we would have been able to find a large funding stream to start with, you know? I mean, I know that's such a simple answer, but it would have it would have expedited the process. You know, the most frustrating thing for us was every month and winter that passed by was one more month there were homeless vets on the street, and one more winter there were homeless vets on the street, and we knew we had something to address it, and we were just being inhibited by basically our bank account. So that was extremely frustrating, and it still is, you know. Knowing that we have this thing that can really fix this at its core, and wanting to be able to snap our fingers and just make it happen. So trusting the process is difficult at times, but worth it.
What is the best thing you've heard from one of your residents who you've helped?
Man, you know, one of the best reoccurring themes is dignity, right? People, when they move in, saying that they automatically start to feel more dignified than they did before. Uh, just little comments like, "Wow, I have a front door." You know, that's something I granted every day. You know, I enter my house, you know, through my garage, basically. You know, um, it's it's the really little, just, you know, feeling like a person, um, feeling at home. I feel worth something again. All those things are just, I mean, hell, just one of those comments could keep me fueled for years, let alone getting them all the time.
Now, Bryan, we're sort of wrapping up our discussion here, and I want to give you one last opportunity to sort of appeal to people. Share with us either how they can donate, or how, if they want to bring the Veterans Community Project to Delaware, how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, so you can reach out to it again through the website, veteranscommunityproject.org. There's contact info on there. There's a little bit of information about our national expansion and what we look for. My appeal would be this: veterans homelessness for so long has seemed like an issue that cannot be tackled at the community level. And what we've done here has shown that you don't have to wait for somebody else to come in on a white horse and fix this for you. You don't have to wait for the federal government or the state or anything like that to develop an initiative to address it. As a community, you can impact this extremely large issue, because those homeless veterans are sleeping in your parks, on your city streets. They are your neighbors, brothers, sisters, friends. And as a community, a group of individuals, you can have such an incredible impact on this population. So don't let the fact that veterans homelessness seems like such a big issue deter you. Like, start with the community, start with the blocks around your house, and then go from there. But again, please feel free to get a hold of us, check us out on social media, because that has a lot of our upcoming initiatives and keeps you up to date, as well as a lot of those heartwarming stories about these transitions and people that move on. But anyway, the hub for everything's our website, veteranscommunityproject.org. And thank you to everyone that stuck around and listened to me blab so much. Amy, thank you so much, because this is the second time you've had to hear me go on and on for a while. I'm sorry, I could talk about this for hours. So anyway, thanks to everybody who's still here. Amy, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea. I'm so glad we could share it here at this year's Millennial Summit. And I plan on writing about this for WDEL, because I think it needs to get out there to a wider audience. And I hope to see you here in Delaware someday, because I think it's a project that we could really use. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us from a parking lot in Pennsylvania in the middle of the vacation here. And thank you all so much for coming out to the Mill Summit this year, virtual style.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Right.